If you turn to Psalms chapter 40, I want to ask all of us a question. Do we delight in doing God's will? Now, when you think of that, do you delight in doing God's will? Is it something you enjoy doing? Christianity is more than just going through the motions, checking off the boxes, being righteous in a way. It's being a faithful child of God. And in order to be a faithful child of God, we have to delight in Him. Psalms chapter 40, let's look at verse 8. It says, I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart. I delight to do your will. And why? Because the law is in his heart. Do we feel that way today? You know, we have the perfect example of Christ. As we read in the Bible, of course, he lived a sinless life, which that's impossible for us to do. But from his childhood on, what was his total being about? Doing my Father's business, doing my Father's will. From the time that he was 12 in the temple, clear to the garden, when he said, not my will, but yours, Father. Clear to hanging upon the cross. His delight was to do his Father's will. That's our perfect example. Do we take that example to heart? Do we have it within us? Do we really delight in doing the will of God? Really delight in it? Unfortunately, there are quite a few that don't. They have a tendency to just kind of go through the motions. Do we meditate day and night upon the laws of God? Let's turn over to Psalms 1, verse 2. Actually, let's start in verse 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in his law doth he meditate day and night. Do we meditate day and night on his word? Now, I read a couple of devotionals with Jill every morning. I read them. That's not meditating. What's meditating? It's soaking it in. It's applying it. It's researching it. It's making sure that, is this talking to me? What am I going to change in my life that will make me more like him? That's meditating. We could read the Bible all day long and never meditate on it. And what good would it be? We would be knowledgeable in the Scriptures, but we wouldn't be applying it with wisdom. When we delight in doing his will, we have a joy of wanting to know more, wanting to do more. Psalms 119, that's that longest chapter in the book, in Actually, in the Bible. Psalms 119, verse 103. How sweet are thy words unto my taste, yea, sweeter than the honey to my mouth. Do we look at this word as sweet? Do we sometimes get a little soured with it when it speaks to us and like it points something out to us that maybe we don't really agree with? Is it sweet then? It should be, because it's showing us what we need to be. It points out what we are and what we need to change. In verse 127 of Psalms 119, it says, Therefore I love thy commandments above gold, yea, above fine gold. If we had the choice of 1,000 pounds of gold or the Bible today, 1,000 pounds of gold, it's a lot of money. Or His Word. Would it be hard to choose? In the world it wouldn't be, because the gold had went out every time. The world would look at that as, yep, I'm going to go with the gold. But this word to us as Christians is finer than gold. It's finer than gold. Do we look at it as being finer than gold? Is it more important? Is it more important than the job that we have? Is it more important than the leisure time on the weekends that we have, that we enjoy so much? Is doing His will a blessing or a burden? I think a lot of times we can get into I don't know whether you'd say the rut of marking off, checking the boxes of our Christianity. And as I once heard someone say, a rut is nothing more than a grave with both ends knocked out. Do we get in a rut when it comes to doing God's will? I mean, what's our plans? We're going to be here Sunday morning for class, for worship, Wednesday night. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have 5 songs. We're going to do the Lord's Supper. We're going to pray 3 times. We're going to have a class. Do we look at that as something we have to do? That mundane? That's just the way it is? Or do we look forward to it with delight? Do we look forward to fellowshipping with our brothers and sisters? The ones that we hopefully will be spending eternity with. Do we look forward to that? Because if we're going to be in eternity forever, we better get along. We better like each other. We better enjoy it here because it's going to be even better up there. There'll be none of the stuff in the world to get in our way. But I think sometimes it's easy to kind of get into that rut. Thinking, I didn't sleep very good last night and I just don't feel up to it today. We should always feel up to it. Unless, of course, it's going to jeopardize someone else's health if we're sick. But just because we don't feel up to it, I feel tired, that's no reason to miss. If we look in Revelation 2, and we've mentioned this in my morning class, where it talks about the church of Ephesus and how he was talking about them. You've lost your first love. You've done really good. You've checked all the boxes, but now you've lost your first love. He says, I would like for you to be back like a child. Like he said in Matthew. The humble child is the one that's going to make it to his kingdom. Hopefully we are not going to be accused of being lukewarm because we're just going through the motions. Because he wants more than just going through the motions. He wants us to have a delight in doing his will. In Psalms 119, verse 11, go back a couple, 3 pages. It says, Thy word have I hid in mine heart, that I might not sin against thee. That's the only way we're going to delight in doing his will, is having his word within our heart. That's the only way. We can't do it by just going through the motions outwardly. It has to be within us. When we are in Christ, as we have been talking about in the morning classes, how do we get in Christ? Through baptism. When we have him, when he's within us, that's where we're going to have the ability to obey him, to be able to delight in doing all that he wants us to do with a willingness of heart. In Psalms 37:31, it says basically the same thing. It says, the law of God is in his heart. None of his steps shall slide. None of his steps shall slide. We are on a slippery slope. Satan is wanting to drag us down. But if we have him, the law of God, in our hearts, our footing is much more solid. We're not going to slide. Every facet of Christianity that is spoken of in this book, praising God, prayer, Bible studies, fellowshipping, all of these things are to bolster and strengthen us to delight in doing God's will. And if we take some of those things out, then we start lacking that strength. A lot of times we can think, well, you know, it's not real convenient to show up at Glenn's once a month on Saturday because, you know, Saturday's kind of my day. But you know what? When you're there, you're fellowshipping, you're praying, you're studying His Word, we're strengthening each other. And that's what counts. You know, going fishing on Saturday, yeah, you might catch a fish, you might not. It might be an enjoyable time. But what did that promote as far as us and God? When we could have had the opportunity of fellowshipping with other brothers and sisters. Granted, we do probably need some alone time with God. But you know what? There's a lot more times that we could be alone when there isn't something planned with the fellowship of the brethren. And it's so important to delight in doing His will. not just check the boxes. If there's anyone that has a need, a prayer need, or hasn't come to the knowledge of knowing Christ and all that He wants us to do according to His gospel, let that be known as we stand and sing our closing song.